When you look at the globe, Antarctica seems like a place you could simply fly across. It's just another continent, and airplanes today cross oceans and deserts with ease. So why don't passenger jets travel directly over the South Pole? The answer will definitely shock you. The promise of the polar shortcut. Airlines design routes to save time and fuel. The shortest distance between 2 points on a sphere is called a Great Circle Route, and sometimes that path goes over the poles. This is why flights between North America and Asia sometimes cross the Arctic. So on paper, flying across Antarctica could create shortcuts. Flight from Sydney to Buenos Aires or from Cape Town to Santiago would be far shorter if it simply cut across the icy continent instead of looping around the oceans. But these routes almost never exist. Instead, planes fly around Antarctica, not over it. To understand why, we need to look at what makes the continent and its skies unlike anywhere else on Earth. Geography of the frozen continent. Antarctica is the highest, driest, coldest, and windiest continent. Nearly 98% of it is covered by ice, with an average thickness of more than 2 kilometers. Its elevation averages about 2,500 meters above sea level, higher than any other continent. The South Pole itself sits at 2,835 meters. The continent is surrounded by the Southern Ocean, and weather systems there circle the landmass in what scientists call the polar vortex. The result becomes some of the most extreme and unpredictable flying conditions in the world. Extreme cold and aviation. Airplanes are built to handle cold air at cruising altitude. Temperatures of negative 40 degrees Celsius are common at 35,000 feet. But over Antarctica, surface temperatures can drop below 60 degrees Celsius, and at altitude it can plunge even lower. This creates several problems. The freezing of fuel. Jet fuel begins to form wax crystals at around negative 47 degrees Celsius. Airlines monitor fuel temperature carefully, but Antarctica pushes conditions close to this threshold. Metal stress. Prolonged exposure to extreme cold can affect aircraft materials and hydraulics. De-icing limits. At Arctic temperatures, standard de-icing fluids lose their effectiveness. While modern jets can withstand Arctic routes, Antarctica is colder still. Pilots and engineers have to consider risks that don't exist anywhere else. The problem of navigation. For most of aviation history, navigation relied on magnetic compasses, but near the South Pole, compasses fail because magnetic lines converge and fluctuate. Even modern GPS-based systems need constant calibration, and satellite coverage at high southern latitudes is less reliable than at the equator. Today's aircraft can technically navigate Antarctica, but backup systems that depend on magnetic headings become nearly useless. If electronics fail, a pilot over the pole has far fewer reliable options. No emergency diversions. One of the biggest barriers to commercial flights over Antarctica is the lack of alternate airports. Aviation safety rules require that long-haul routes always plan emergency diversion points. If a plane has engine trouble, cabin depressurization, or a medical emergency, it has to be able to land within a reasonable distance. Over Antarctica, there are no large-scale commercial airports. The few runways that do exist, like the Wilkins runway near Australia's Casey Station or Union Glacier Camp's ice runway, are seasonal, ice-based, and not suitable for fully loaded passenger jets. That means that if something does go wrong in mid-flight over the South Pole, there's nowhere to land. The nearest proper airports are thousands of kilometers away in South America, Africa, Australia, and New Zealand. ETOPS Regulations. ETOPS stands for Extended Range Twin-Engine Operational Performance Standards, governing how far a twin-engine aircraft can fly from a diversion airport. Today, aircraft like the Boeing 787 and Airbus A350 are certified for ETOPS 180 and even ETOPS 370, meaning they can fly for several hours on one engine. But over Antarctica, diversion times would exceed even these extended limits. A jet in trouble may face more than 6 hours with no possible runway. Regulations prevent airlines from scheduling flights which violate these safety margins. Dangerous weather systems. Antarctica's atmosphere is unstable and poorly mapped compared to other regions. clouds. The continent generates katabatic winds, streams of cold, dense air that rush down slopes at hurricane force. These winds can appear suddenly and with little warning. Turbulence becomes extreme, with downdrafts strong enough to force aircraft into dangerous altitudes. Weather forecasting stations are sparse. Pilots have less data than they do over oceans or the Arctic. Even satellites struggle to predict Antarctic storms because cloud cover and ice surfaces reflect radar signals in confusing ways. Communication challenges. Aircraft maintain constant communication with ground control through satellites and high-frequency radio. But over Antarctica, communication blackouts are common. The curvature of the Earth and the lack of infrastructure mean that signals can fail, leaving pilots without contact for long periods of time. In normal airspace, losing contact is rare and taken seriously. Over Antarctica, it could be routine. Airlines prefer to avoid the risk altogether. Human safety concerns. Even if a plane did manage to land in Antarctica during an emergency, survival would be another challenge. The continent's temperatures, winds, and isolation make rescue operations slow and dangerous. A stranded aircraft may wait days or even weeks for help. For commercial airlines carrying hundreds of passengers, this risk is unacceptable. International treaties and restrictions. Antarctica is governed by the Antarctic Treaty System signed in 1959. It designates the continent as a scientific preserve and bans military activity. While it doesn't directly forbid overflights, it restricts development of infrastructure like airports and fuel depots that would support a large-scale amount of aviation. Environmental protocols discourage heavy traffic. The continent is home to unique ecosystems, and noise or pollution from frequent flights could affect wildlife like penguins and seals. Governments prefer to keep Antarctica as undisturbed as possible. Historical flights over Antarctica. While commercial airlines avoid the South Pole, flights have crossed Antarctica under special conditions. In 1956, U.S. Navy Admiral George Dufek became the first person to land an aircraft at the South Pole using a ski-equipped R-4D. In the 1970s and 80s, sightseeing flights over Antarctica became popular, especially from New Zealand. However, in 1979, Air New Zealand Flight 901 would crash into Mount Erebus due to whiteout conditions, killing every single person on board. The disaster highlighted the risks of flying in a region where terrain is obscured by snow and navigation errors are much harder to detect. Today, limited sightseeing flights do still exist, mainly out of Australia, but they avoid landing and fly only under clear weather conditions. The question of fuel efficiency. Some would argue that flying over Antarctica could shorten the routes. This is true in terms of distance. However, the savings are often smaller than expected. For example, Sydney to Buenos Aires is 11,300 kilometers. Flying directly over Antarctica would only shave off a few hundred kilometers compared to the Southern Ocean route. The risk is far greater than the reward, and in most cases, Great Circle routes that would pass near Antarctica are simply adjusted to safer paths over the South Pacific or South Atlantic. Polar flight technology. Modern aircraft can and do fly over the Arctic. Routes between Asia, North America, and Europe regularly cross near the North Pole. These flights became common after 1998 when Russia opened up its airspace. But the North Pole is not the South Pole. Arctic routes still have diversion airports in Alaska, Canada, Greenland, Norway, and Russia. Temperatures may be extreme, but not as consistently brutal as Antarctica, and communication infrastructure is much stronger. Antarctica lacks all of these advantages. Technology has closed many of the gaps, but it cannot solve the absence of airports, rescue services, and stable weather. Myths and misconceptions. There are many internet claims that airlines ban flights over Antarctica for secret reasons, when in reality, there's no outright ban. Aircraft can fly there, and some do, and the issue is simply safety and practicality. Without diversion airports, stable communication, and predictable weather, no airline's going to risk the scheduled commercial service. Attempts and abandonment. From time to time, proposals have surfaced for Antarctic airports capable of supporting passenger jets. Australia has considered paving Wilkins Runway, which currently operates only for smaller aircraft in the summer, but costs are enormous, and environmental concerns stall the development. No government has moved beyond small research support airport airfields, and the vision of Antarctica as a hub for global aviation has been studied and consistently abandoned. The irony of the frozen continent. Humanity has built airports on artificial islands, carved runways into deserts, and even flown commercial aircraft over the North Pole. But Antarctica remains off limits, not because it's forbidden, but because it is uniquely hostile to aviation. Its geography, weather, and isolation combine to make it one continent that modern airliners avoid. So then, why can't you fly over Antarctica? Because everything about the continent resists it. The extreme cold threatens fuel and materials. Navigation systems lose reliability. There are no diversion airports, no rescue options, and no safe landing strips. International treaties discourage development, and the potential time savings are small compared to the overwhelming risks. For airlines, the calculation is simple. It's safer, cheaper, and more reliable to fly around Antarctica than to cross it. On the map, a polar shortcut may look tempting, when in reality, it remains one of the last frontiers where modern aviation decided not to go. The world is full of mysteries, and we're here to crack them. Thanks for watching World Crack. Be sure you subscribe to the channel, leave a like on this video, and leave your comments down below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.